Hello, my name's Lee Petts and I'm the founder and managing director of Seekly, a Lancashire-based recruitment business. And I'm going to talk you through some of the potential people changes of a no-deal Brexit at the end of October. In terms of what I'm going to cover, I'll provide an overview of some of the employment impacts that a potential no-deal Brexit will result in. And I'm going to focus on three key themes and only need-to-know information and actionable insights that will enable you to take short-term measures to get better prepared for a no-deal Brexit. Before I go any further, I think it's important to just note for people that citizens of the Republic of Ireland, which is and will remain an EU member state, will not be affected by any of the changes that I'm about to talk about. And I think it's important to get that in people's minds right from the start, because I know that's been a concern for lots of businesses in the last few weeks. So Irish citizens will still be able to work and visit and reside in the UK pretty much as they do now, with no change. It's also important to note that this whole webinar is predicated on the idea that we will leave without a deal. If we leave with a deal of some description, then much of what I'm about to talk about now could be different, so people need to keep that in mind as well. In terms of learning objectives, we have four, so by the end of this webinar you will hopefully better appreciate the likely impacts on your business, have a better understanding of what you and your employees will need to do to get prepared, be able to find and access additional government guidance, and importantly realise the benefits of starting now and not adopting a wait and see posture. During the course of the last couple of weeks I've delivered this presentation and many others like it to businesses across Lancashire, and it's pretty evident that there is a huge amount of apathy out there amongst the business community regarding Brexit, and particularly preparation for a no-deal Brexit. And I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that, for many of us who've been here before, we've lived through the Y2K bug from the late 1990s, and we're all disappointed in some ways when we woke up the next day and our computers all worked still, despite having spent months and perhaps in some cases years getting ready for that eventuality. We've had the same more recently with GDPR, and I know lots of SMEs particularly have spent time and effort preparing for GDPR. And now look back on that and feel that much of what they did was perhaps nugatory, because not an awful lot appears to have changed. I think it would be a mistake for businesses to continue to maintain that same wait-and-see posture with Brexit, and I think prudent businesses will be the ones that plan now, just in case. So starting with the first of our three key themes, let's have a look at what it might mean for businesses that send UK workers overseas into Europe. In terms of what's changing, there are three key things to be aware of. So firstly, staff travelling to European Union countries, or those in the European Economic Area and Switzerland, if they're going to provide services, may in future need a visa, a work or a residence permit. They may also need to make social security contributions, both here at home in the UK and in the countries in which they're working, and their UK professional qualifications, if they rely on them for the service they provide, will need to be officially recognised to work in regulated professions in those countries. And that's got a lot to do with the fact that at the moment we have a scheme of mutual recognition of our professional qualifications across the European Union. That will change. So, for instance, right now, if you're an AAT qualified accountant and you provide accountancy and audit services to a company that happens to have operations in Germany, your accountancy qualifications will automatically be recognised and accepted. That won't be the case going forwards in a no-deal Brexit. The sorts of businesses that could be affected will be those in things like transport and distribution, where drivers ostensibly provide a service when they're making deliveries in these other countries. It will affect consultancy businesses that send people overseas to deliver projects, and equipment suppliers if they send maintenance or repair engineers, for instance, to service equipment or repair equipment for their European customers. Now, I think at this point it's worth making a bit of a distinction, because the guidance that's available tells us that this applies to UK workers that are delivering services in European countries. That's different to people that just visit those countries on business. So if you're a sales rep and you're travelling to a trade fair in Frankfurt, for instance, for a few days, then the changes that I've just talked about won't apply to you. You will still have to make sure that you comply with the immigration rules of the country that you're going to visit, but the social security payments and the issue around professional qualifications, that won't apply to you because you're not providing services. So in terms of recommended actions to take to get prepared, it's important to understand and check what the entry requirements will be for the specific countries that your staff may well visit to provide services, and to make sure that they comply with those immigration controls in those countries. Now you'll see that there's a URL there on the screen. I do that all the way through this presentation. You'll find that where there is official government guidance that it might be helpful for you to access, I provide a link to it in the slide. So that's where you will find the EU country guides, and from there you will be able to understand or find out what the entry requirements will be for specific countries that you may visit. Another action to take would be to check the social security requirements for the countries that you might work in, and ensure that the right arrangements in place. And again, there's a URL there that will take you to the relevant pages where you'll be able to access that guidance. What I would say is, and it's important to understand this now, although the UK government has done much to provide streamlined, simplified guidance, when you follow these URLs, you will find that at some juncture, to get the information you need, you will start to be taken to European websites in the host countries that you're interested in, and you will find that the information you need isn't necessarily presented in a helpful format. The process of finding that information isn't necessarily intuitive, and you could also find there are some language barriers involved, so that's something to just keep in mind. It would be fantastic if the government provided us with a spreadsheet listing all of the different EU countries across the top and all of the different entry requirements in columns underneath for each country, but that doesn't exist at the moment, so we have to find that information for ourselves. And the third thing to do is check the European Commission's Regulated Professions database to see if your profession is listed, and then contact each individual country where your staff will provide services to find out what they'll need to do to have those qualifications individually recognised in those countries. Again, that database is accessible at the URL on the screen, and again, it's not entirely intuitive. So I did a search recently for accountancy and accountants and AAT and some of the other qualifications that we see in the UK for that practice, and I found that actually you have to put part of the word in to get the right string to get the result that you need. So if you put in something like accountancy or accountancy practice, it will bring up no results. So you'll need to play around with the database to get the results that you're interested in, and again, that will take some time. So none of these processes are particularly intuitive. And that's why I say you need to keep in mind that finding the information you'll need won't be quick or easy necessarily. It's going to take employees some time to get the necessary visas and work and residence permits they might need, so you will need to plan ahead with them. If you've got employees that you know are already expected to visit, say, Sweden from the 1st of November onwards, then now is the time to start looking into whether or not they will need a visa and whether they'll need to pay social security payments while they're there, and so on and so forth. Your employees could also experience some delays when crossing borders because there may be additional immigration controls at those borders, so they'll need to allow some additional travel time, especially if they're going to visit multiple countries and travel across multiple borders as part of that trip. So that rounds up the first of our key themes, which is all about sending UK workers overseas into European Union countries. Next, we're going to look at hiring temporary European labour to come and work here in the UK. Now, I think it's fair to say that there's been a huge amount of confusion around people's rights and entitlements, and whether or not we will still have access to this transient, seasonal, particularly seasonal European workforce. The answer to that question is yes, we will, and there is not going to be some sort of iron curtain that just falls down post no-deal Brexit and prevents European workers from coming here on a temporary basis. In terms of what is actually changing, well, those European citizens will still be able to come and work in the UK up to and including the 31st of December 2020, pretty much as they do now. So to gain access to the country for those purposes, they will simply need a passport or a European biometric ID card. And from an employer's point of view, in terms of right to work checks, the only checks you will be expected to make are the same as they are now. So you'll need to check that they have a valid passport or a valid ID. If they intend to work in the UK for periods of 3 months or more, then they will be expected to register for the Euro Temporary Leave to Remain scheme, Euro TLR. Now that scheme isn't open yet and will be administered by the Home Office from the 1st of November onwards. And if they successfully register with the TLR, then they will be entitled to remain in the UK for a period of up to 36 months. From the 1st of January 2021, we expect a new points-based immigration scheme to be introduced, similar to the one in Australia. And that's still very much in its infancy at the moment, and although we have some idea of the broad shape of that scheme, the details are still emerging and evolving. So for instance, there is an expert commission looking at it at the moment, examining the Australian system and other international comparators whilst they determine what the scheme will look like for us here in the UK. But the key here is that European citizens will still be able to come here and work in a no-deal Brexit world pretty much as they do now on a temporary basis. The sorts of businesses that could obviously be affected would be those in the hospitality trade, so hotels and restaurants, and I imagine that's quite important to the Cumbria economy, agricultural and farming operations, businesses involved in distribution, packaging, fulfilment, particularly in the run-up to busy periods like Christmas, for instance, and some manufacturing businesses. In terms of recommended actions to take here, it's important to familiarise yourself with the rules on temporary European workers and including making those appropriate employment checks. Now there is a URL here and I have to say this is some of the most clear and concise guidance on this topic that the government has made available. It's a downloadable PDF. I think it's absolutely fantastic in the way it's set out and the information that it provides. You will see it's titled to make it suggest that it's all about the farming community. And I think that's because the farming community had really big fears about this issue. But the reality is the guidance in that leaflet applies across all sectors. So I would advise people to go and have a good look at that and make themselves aware of what these changes might mean. You will need to make sure that if you've got European citizens that you intend to employ for 3 months or more have registered with that Euro TLR scheme. And I would advise you to collaborate with other business critical suppliers that you might have to make sure that they're on the same page as you. One of the things that we're starting to see evidence of anecdotally are European workers that don't understand how this scheme operates, don't understand what their rights might be, choosing to either not come to the UK to take up work or, for those that are already here, to leave the UK. And so some businesses could find that they suddenly end up with a much depleted workforce. And if that's a major supplier to your business, that could have very significant implications for you. So although none of this may apply to you directly, there could be some indirect impacts, and I think it's worth examining that in your business to make sure that your business critical suppliers are on the same page as you with this. So that's the second of our 3 key themes, which is all about temporary European labour coming to the UK to work on perhaps a seasonal basis, for instance. Now we're going to talk about our third and final key theme, which is about the permanent employment of European workers in the UK. Now, the government policy on this is very clear. It recognises the importance of the European workforce that we already have in the UK, and it wants those people to feel like they are valued and it wants them to feel like they are able to stay here and settle, put down roots and remain pretty much as they and live their lives pretty much as they do now here in the UK. So the government has done a lot to try and make that possible for EU citizens that currently live and work here, so they feel like they're able to stay. Again, there's a lot of confusion over this, and I think a lot of people really don't understand what this means. That's probably got a lot to do with the fact that prior to the 4th of September, the noises from government suggested that there was going to be more of a sort of guillotine effect in a no-deal Brexit, and that our existing European workforce might have to leave the UK soon after. That position has been significantly softened, I think in recognition of the fact that that workforce is critical to many sectors of the UK economy and that those people provide real social value for us. So the government wants them to be able to stay. If they are resident in the UK on the day that we exit the European Union in a no-deal scenario, then they will be able to register for something called the EU Settlement Scheme. And they will either achieve settled or pre-settled status if they do so. They will have until the 31st of December 2020 to apply to that scheme, but as I say, they must already be living in the UK on the day we leave the European Union. If they've been here for 5 years continuously, then they will likely obtain settled status. If they've been here for any period less than 5 years, then they will likely obtain pre-settled status. If somebody obtains pre-settled status, once they've been here five years continuously, they will then be expected to apply again for settled status. Now, this is not the same as citizenship, so this is just the right to remain, but it doesn't make somebody a UK citizen. I think that needs to be made clear. A European worker that's not living in the UK on exit day and can't demonstrate that residency, well, then they'll be able to work here on a temporary basis, as I've just explained, in blocks of 3 months or 36 months if they apply to the Euro TLR scheme. And they'll be able to do that until the 31st of December 2020. The sorts of businesses that could be affected by this change, well, it could be any business realistically, not necessarily just those of a seasonal nature or those in agriculture, for instance. So this could just be any business that employs staff from the European Union, the European Economic Area or Switzerland on a permanent long-term basis and intends to do so post-Brexit. Now, in terms of the recommendations to take here, I think it's really important to help affected employees understand the mechanics of the scheme, how to apply, where to provide where the guidance can be found, and to reassure them actually that they are welcome in this country and there is provision there for them to be able to stay. I think it's important businesses do that very quickly and provide that reassurance as soon as possible, because what you don't want are valued employees that don't understand their rights to remain, feeling that they may have to leave the UK and making plans to depart and go and live and work somewhere else in the European Union or back in their home country. And I think that's a real risk for people. So it's important to provide that reassurance, and I would urge businesses to do that sooner rather than later. Provide some comfort and some certainty to potentially affected employers. And again, there is a URL there that provides access to the relevant advice and guidance on joining the settlement scheme. In order to register with the scheme, your European colleagues will have to provide some proof of ID. Now, they can do that in a number of ways. They'll be able to do that via the post, but a lot of people are uncomfortable sending important documents like that by post, so passports and ID cards. And so in recognition of that, the government has developed a dedicated Android app that you can use on a smartphone. There is an Apple version we're expecting to see hit the Apple Store sometime in November, we now believe. The employee themselves don't need to have an Android phone or indeed the Android app themselves, so you can offer to scan their documents for them if you're an Android device user. There is another way to have documents scanned and uploaded, and that's via one of a number of organisations across the UK that have offered to undertake that service for people. So your employees will be able to visit these locations with their hard copy documents and someone else will scan and send them. Again, you'll see on screen there is a URL there. If you follow that link, you will find that you can access a postcode search to find the nearest office for you. Now, I haven't checked for Cumbria, but I can tell you that for the whole of Lancashire, which is quite a big county, there is only one location where someone can take hard copy documents and have them scanned for them, and that's in Preston. So that's not terribly convenient for people that live in, say, Carnforth or Skelmersdale that need to travel quite some distance to get into Preston to have their documents scanned. So you may find that that's very similar here in Cumbria, and there may only be one location. It's likely to be in one of the main administrative centres, like Carlisle, for instance. So they'll need help accessing the facilities to have their identity documents scanned and uploaded. Again, I would urge people to make relevant inquiries of their business critical suppliers to make sure they're taking appropriate steps as well. And if you have a supplier that depends on a large European workforce, and they are not on the same page as you, and there is a risk that some of their employees may, inadvertently, not fully understanding their rights to remain, leave the UK and make some life-changing decisions and exit the UK, leaving your suppliers with a gaping hole in their workforce. If that could affect you and your business continuity, I would advise you to start looking at alternatives now, just in case. And I think it's also worth starting to plan now for when that points-based immigration scheme comes in. As I say, it's still evolving at the moment. The scheme is by no means fixed. We've got an idea of the broad shape, but you can sign up to daily alerts from the government at gov.uk, and they will provide you with daily emails updating you on a whole range of policy areas, including this issue of the points-based immigration scheme. I would say that if you sign up for that right now, you will be deluged and your inbox will be full every morning with Brexit-related material, but it's definitely a very valuable resource if you want to stay in touch with what's going on in government policy terms. And that brings me really to the end of the session, having covered those three key themes. So just to summarise, UK residents that work in EU countries or the European Economic Area or Switzerland in a post-Brexit world from the 1st of November may need visas and work permits or residence permits. They may also need to provide social security payments in the countries where they're going to work, as well as here at home, so they will still have to pay national insurance contributions at home as well. And they may need to get their professional qualifications uniquely recognised in the countries where they're going to work if they rely on those qualifications for the service they provide. European citizens that don't already live in the UK will still be able to come and work here on a temporary basis with relatively minor restrictions compared to what they experience now, and they're able to do that up until the 31st of December 2020. I should say at this point that that's the deadline for applying to things like the settlement scheme or, in the case of temporary labour, the Euro temporary leave to remain scheme. Now, in theory, and there is nothing in the guidance that would prohibit this, it seems, somebody could come to this country and work in what are effectively 3-month blocks for the whole of next year and then apply to the Euro TLR scheme on the very last day that it accepts applications, and then obtain that temporary status for a period of 36 months, which would actually then take them right the way through to the end of 2023. You may find that that's actually of benefit to some workers that want to come and understand whether or not our culture suits them, whether they might want to stay here on a long-term basis, and to wait and see how that points-based immigration scheme unfolds and whether or not it will be favourable to them wanting to enter and remain in the UK for the long term. So just bear in mind that that is an option that will be open to our European colleagues coming to work in the UK on a temporary basis for quite some time. And I point it out because I think it's important for people to recognise the elasticity that's been built into this transition period to make it as favourable as possible so that we still have access to that European migrant workforce. Those European citizens already live and work here when we exit the EU, provided they are resident in the UK at the time on exit day. If they intend to continue staying here and working here, they'll need to apply to that EU settlement scheme. And they'll be able to do that until the 31st of December 2020. If they haven't applied by that point and they wish to stay beyond that, then they will be straight into that points-based immigration system from January 1st, 2021. As will anybody else come to the UK to work after that point. And that will apply not just to European citizens, but that will apply to anybody from anywhere in the world. And finally, I would again just reiterate the need to think beyond our own business boundaries and think about our supply chains and how they may be affected by some of these people changes, and to make sure that we are prepared for the very worst outcomes if those business critical suppliers haven't done enough to prepare and see an exodus of their workforce, which could obviously affect your business. So in terms of learning objectives, right at the very start, I said by the end of the session, you'd hopefully have a better appreciation of likely impacts on your business, an understanding of what you and your employees need to do, know where to find and access additional guidance, which I've peppered throughout the presentation with those URLs, and realise it's important to start now and not maintain that wait and see position. And that's really important given the amount of effort that you're going to need to go to find out about things like social security payments in other countries and the need for visas and entry requirements. It isn't intuitive. It will take some time, and inevitably there may be language and cultural barriers as well to uncovering that information. So the sooner you start that, the more prepared you will be in your business for a no-deal Brexit at the end of October. If you need more help and guidance, the Chamber has a helpline that you can use, and the number for that is 0845 226 0040. I'll give you that again, 0845 226 0040.